Welcome, I'm John, and today I'm going to tell you an exciting story. Cleaner heard cries in the basement and found what the nanny was hiding with the boss's son. The November cold had settled deep into Greenwich, Connecticut, wrapping the suburb in a brittle quiet that felt more like judgment than peace. Rachel Miller pulled her second-hand Honda into the circular driveway of the Montgomery estate, the gravel crunching beneath her tires like broken promises. She cut the engine and sat for a moment, staring up at the three-story colonial that loomed before her, all white columns and perfect symmetry, a monument to wealth she would never understand. 26 years old, and she still felt like that scared 17-year-old kid from Lubbock, Texas, the one who'd buried both parents within a year and learned that the world didn't stop spinning just because yours had shattered. 9 years of scraping by, 9 years of sleeping on couches and working double shifts at diners, gas stations, anywhere that would take her. Now she cleaned houses for people who probably spent more on a single dinner than she made in a month. Rachel grabbed her supply caddy from the trunk, the same one she'd bought at a dollar store 3 years ago, now held together with duct tape and stubbornness. She'd learned to move through these houses like air, invisible and necessary, touching everything while mattering to no one. It was survival. It was dignity, in its own quiet way. The side door was unlocked, as always. The Montgomerys never used the main entrance when they weren't home. That was for guests, for people who mattered. Rachel slipped inside, hit immediately by the scent of lavender and expensive candles, the kind that cost $40 and promised serenity to people who'd never known real chaos. She started in the kitchen, a sprawling space of marble countertops and stainless steel appliances that gleamed like they'd never been touched. In truth, they rarely were. The Montgomerys ate out most nights. Mr. Montgomery worked 80-hour weeks at some hedge fund in Manhattan. Mrs. Montgomery spent her days at the country club or coordinating charity events, the kind where rich people congratulated themselves for caring about poor people they'd never actually meet. Rachel filled her bucket, added the pine-scented cleaner, and got on her hands and knees. She'd tried using a mop at first, but Mrs. Montgomery had pulled her aside with that smile, the one that looked kind but wasn't, and suggested that hand-scrubbing showed real attention to detail. Translation: I want to know you're working hard for my money. So Rachel scrubbed. She thought about the online courses she'd been researching, community college programs in nursing or education, something that could pull her out of this endless cycle of other people's dirt. She had $3,147 saved in a coffee can hidden in her apartment. Not enough yet. Never enough yet. The kitchen floor was half done when she heard it, a sound so faint she almost convinced herself she'd imagined it. Rachel sat back on her heels, her wet hands dripping onto her jeans. She held her breath, listening. There it was again, muffled, distant, coming from somewhere below. The basement. Rachel's heart began a slow, heavy thump against her ribs. The Montgomerys had told her explicitly the basement was off limits. Storage, Mrs. Montgomery had said with a dismissive wave. Nothing down there but old furniture and holiday decorations. No need to waste your time. But that sound wasn't furniture. It wasn't pipes settling or the house groaning against the cold. It was crying. A child's voice, thin and desperate, pushing through layers of wood and silence. Help, please. Rachel stood slowly, her knees cracking, the scrub brush falling into the bucket with a splash. Her hands trembled as she dried them on her shirt. Every instinct she'd honed over 9 years of surviving alone screamed at her to ignore it, to finish her work, to collect her check and leave. She thought about Mrs. Chen, another cleaner who'd been fired last year for overstepping boundaries. Her crime had been suggesting that the family's teenage son might need help with his obvious drinking problem. Stay in your lane. Don't ask questions. Invisible people don't have opinions. But that crying, God, that crying. It sounded like her baby brother, Jimmy, the night their mother died. He'd been 10 years old, curled up in Rachel's lap in a hospital waiting room that smelled like disinfectant and despair, making sounds just like this. Small, broken, begging the universe for mercy it wouldn't grant. Jimmy lived with their aunt in Dallas now. Rachel sent money when she could, called every Sunday. He was 19, working construction, doing okay. But she remembered his cries. She would always remember. And now, in this mansion of cold perfection, someone else's child was crying those same tears. Rachel's feet moved before her mind finished deciding. She crossed the kitchen, her wet footprints marking the clean floor like evidence of her choice. The basement door was tucked beside the pantry, easy to miss if you weren't looking. She turned the handle. It opened without resistance, revealing wooden stairs descending into darkness. "Hello?" Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "Liam." The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by something worse. A held breath, the silence of prey hoping the predator will pass by. Rachel's hand found the light switch. A single bulb flickered to life below, casting long shadows that seemed to breathe. She took the first step down, then another, each creak of wood a small surrender of the life she'd carefully built. Whatever waited in that basement would change everything. She knew it the way she'd known, at 17, standing in front of 2 fresh graves, that her childhood was over. But some things mattered more than safety. Some cries couldn't be ignored. 3 weeks earlier, Rachel had met Vanessa for the first time. It was a Tuesday morning, unseasonably warm for October, and Rachel had arrived at the Montgomery estate to find a moving truck parked in the driveway. She'd let herself in through the side door as usual, but the house felt different, alive with voices and movement instead of its typical mausoleum silence. "Oh, you must be the cleaner." A voice like honey and wind chimes floated down from the second-floor landing. Rachel looked up to see a young woman descending the curved staircase, each step measured and graceful, like she was perpetually aware of being photographed. Vanessa Hartwell was 24 years old, though she carried herself with the practiced poise of someone much older. Blonde hair fell in perfect beach waves over her shoulders. Her skin had that expensive glow that came from regular facials and products Rachel couldn't pronounce. She wore white linen pants and a silk blouse that probably cost more than Rachel's rent, somehow managing to look effortlessly elegant while unpacking boxes. "I'm Vanessa, Liam's new nanny." She extended a manicured hand, her smile revealing impossibly white teeth. "We're going to be seeing a lot of each other, I think." Rachel shook her hand, immediately aware of her own calloused palms and broken nails. "Rachel, nice to meet you. Mrs. Montgomery speaks so highly of you. She says you're very thorough." The pause before thorough was almost imperceptible, but Rachel caught it. It was the same pause rich people used before words like simple or adequate, a verbal pat on the head. Over the following weeks, Rachel watched Vanessa settle into the Montgomery household like she'd been born to it. The young nanny seemed to understand instinctively how to navigate the invisible hierarchies of wealth. She laughed at Mr. Montgomery's unfunny jokes about the stock market. She complimented Mrs. Montgomery's outfit choices with an enthusiasm that never quite reached her eyes. She posted carefully curated photos on Instagram. "Dear Nanny Life, Blessed Rar Greenwich CT," always featuring Liam at strategic angles that suggested care without revealing too much of the family's private world. But it was Liam himself who worried Rachel. The 8-year-old had always been a quiet child, the kind who seemed to carry the weight of his parents, expectations like stones in his pockets. Before Vanessa, he'd occasionally seek Rachel out while she worked, sitting on the kitchen floor with his sketchbook, drawing elaborate mazes that never seemed to have exits. They didn't talk much, but there was a comfort in the shared silence. 2 people who understood what it meant to be present but unseen. After Vanessa arrived, Liam changed. He stopped drawing, stopped lingering in doorways. The few times Rachel saw him, he seemed smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched, his eyes darting toward Vanessa like a prisoner checking for guards. Once, Rachel found him in the playroom, staring at a wall of untouched toys, remote control cars, building sets, video games still in their packaging, gifts from parents too busy to play with him themselves. "Hey, buddy," Rachel had said softly. "You okay?" Liam jumped like she'd shouted. His eyes were red-rimmed, his small hands twisted together. "I'm fine," he whispered, the lie so obvious it hurt. Then Vanessa's voice had called from somewhere upstairs. "Liam, where are you, sweetie?" And the boy had bolted from the room like a startled animal. Rachel mentioned it once to Mrs. Montgomery, carefully, while folding laundry in the master bedroom. "Liam seems a bit quieter lately. Is everything okay with him?" Mrs. Montgomery barely looked up from her phone, scrolling through whatever consumed the attention of the very rich. "Oh, you know how children are." Adjustment period with the new nanny. Vanessa's wonderful though, Columbia-educated, impeccable references. "We're lucky to have her." The conversation was over. Rachel was a cleaner, not a child psychologist, not a mother. Not anyone whose opinion about the Montgomerys' parenting mattered, but she noticed things. The way Vanessa's Instagram perfection never quite matched the tension Rachel felt in the house. The way the young nanny's smile would drop the instant she thought no one was watching, her face settling into something cold and distant. The way Liam had started flinching at sudden movements. And then there were the basement's visits. Rachel never went to the basement. It was off limits. But she noticed Vanessa's patterns. Every few days, around mid-morning when Mrs. Montgomery was at Pilates and Mr. Montgomery was in Manhattan, Vanessa would disappear downstairs for 20 and sometimes 30 minutes. She'd emerge looking flushed, distracted, her carefully maintained composure slightly cracked. Just organizing storage, she'd say if Rachel happened to be nearby. That brilliant smile snapping back into place. Mrs. Montgomery wants me to catalog the holiday decorations. Such a mess down there. But Rachel never saw any boxes come up, never saw any evidence of organization. And Vanessa's hands, when she emerged, were always clean. Too clean for someone sorting through dusty storage. Rachel told herself it wasn't her business. Told herself that rich people had strange habits, that she was probably imagining things, projecting her own childhood traumas onto a situation she didn't understand. Vanessa was educated, polished, came from money herself, according to the snippets of conversation Rachel overheard. What would someone like that have to hide? Still, Rachel started paying attention. She noted the days Vanessa went to the basement, started arriving a few minutes early to her shifts, staying a few minutes late. She watched the way Liam's eyes would track Vanessa's movements, something like fear flickering across his young face. And she wondered what secrets lived in the Montgomery basement, in the one room she was forbidden to clean. Now, standing at the top of those basement stairs, hearing that muffled crying rising from the darkness below, Rachel understood that her instincts had been right all along. Something was very wrong in the perfect Montgomery house, and whatever it was happening right now. Rachel descended into the dark, each step taking her further from the safe, invisible life she'd built, and closer to a truth she suspected would cost her everything. But Liam's cries echoed in the shadows, and some sounds couldn't be ignored, not even by a woman who'd learned to survive by staying silent. The basement smelled wrong. Rachel noticed it immediately as she descended the wooden stairs, her hand gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles went white. It wasn't the musty odor of old furniture or the chemical tang of stored paint. It was something organic and unsettling, stale air, unwashed fabric, and underneath it all, the sharp metallic scent of fear. The single bulb cast harsh shadows that seemed to move with her breathing. Rachel's heart hammered against her ribs, each beat a reminder that she could still turn back, still climb those stairs and return to her bucket and her ignorance and her paycheck. Liam? Her voice came out barely above a whisper. The crying had stopped when she'd called down, replaced by a silence that felt thick and suffocating. Rachel reached the bottom of the stairs and paused, letting her eyes adjust to the dim light. The basement was larger than she'd expected, stretching beneath the entire first floor of the house. Support beams created a maze of shadows. Cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls, labeled in Mrs. Montgomery's precise handwriting. Christmas, Halloween, Liam, baby clothes. A normal basement, a wealthy family's storage space, except for the sound of shallow, panicked breathing coming from the far corner. Rachel moved forward, her sneakers silent on the concrete floor. She navigated around an old treadmill, past a stack of vintage suitcases, toward the darkest section of the basement where the single bulb's light barely reached. That's when she saw him. Liam was curled against the wall behind a row of plastic storage bins, his small body wedged into the corner like he was trying to disappear into the concrete itself. Even in the dim light, Rachel could see the tear tracks on his dirty cheeks, the way his thin shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. But it was what surrounded him that made Rachel's blood turn to ice. Bed sheets, expensive, high-thread count bed sheets that Rachel herself had washed and folded just days ago, were knotted around his wrists and ankles, not tight enough to cut off circulation, but secure enough that his attempts to free himself had only created angry red marks on his pale skin. A strip of cloth hung loose around his neck, like a gag that had been removed or had slipped down. "Oh my God!" Rachel rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside the boy. "Liam, honey, it's okay. It's Rachel. I'm going to help you." The child's eyes went wide with terror, and for a horrible moment, Rachel thought he didn't recognize her. Then his face crumpled, and a sob tore from his throat, raw and desperate. The sound of someone who'd been holding back screams for too long. Shh, shh, it's okay. Rachel's hands shook as she worked at the knots binding his wrists. Whoever had tied them knew what they were doing. The sheets were twisted in a way that made them difficult to undo quickly. I've got you. You're safe now. She said I was bad. Liam's voice was hoarse, broken. She said bad boys have to learn. She said. His words dissolved into gasping sobs. Rachel finally freed his wrists and moved to his ankles, her mind racing. She said, Vanessa. It had to be Vanessa. But where was she now? As if summoned by the thought, Rachel heard it. Footsteps on the floor above. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving across the kitchen toward the basement door. Rachel's fingers fumbled with the last knot as Liam grabbed her arm with both hands, his grip surprisingly strong. Don't let her take me again, he whispered, his voice breaking. Please. She says things that don't make sense. She talks to people who aren't there. The basement door opened. Light spilled down the stairs, and Vanessa's voice floated into the darkness, eerily cheerful. Liam, are you being a good boy down there? It's almost time for your lesson. Rachel's heart stopped. She pulled Liam close, pressing a finger to her lips. The boy buried his face in her shoulder, his whole body trembling. Vanessa descended the stairs, her designer boots clicking against the wood. She was humming something, a children's lullaby, rendered sinister by the circumstances. Rachel could see her shadow stretching down the wall, elongating with each step. You know the rules, Liam. Good boys come when they're called. Bad boys. Vanessa reached the bottom of the stairs and turned toward their corner. She froze. For a moment, the three of them existed in a strange tableau. Rachel kneeling with Liam clutched to her chest, Vanessa standing 10 feet away, her perfect face registering surprise. Then Vanessa's expression shifted into something Rachel had never seen before. The mask of the polished, educated Nanny cracked completely. Her eyes, which had always seemed calculating and cold, now looked unfocused, distant. Her lips moved soundlessly, like she was having a conversation with someone only she could hear. You shouldn't be here. Vanessa's voice was different too, flat, disconnected. This is private. This is necessary. You don't understand what he needs, what they all need. She took a step forward, her movements suddenly jerky and uncoordinated. The voices told me. They told me how to make him better, how to fix him. Rachel's mouth went dry. This wasn't just cruelty. This wasn't just abuse. Vanessa was somewhere else entirely, lost in a reality that existed only in her fractured mind. Vanessa. Rachel forced her voice to stay calm, though every instinct screamed at her to run. Let me take Liam upstairs. We can talk about this. Get you some help. Help? Vanessa laughed, and the sound was all wrong, too high, too sharp. I'm the one helping. I'm saving him from becoming like the others. Weak, spoiled, broken. Her eyes focused suddenly on Rachel, and for the first time, seemed to actually see her. You're just the cleaner. You clean messes. You don't understand how to clean souls. She reached into her pocket. Rachel didn't wait to see what she would pull out. In one fluid motion, she scooped Liam into her arms. The boy weighed almost nothing, all bones and fear, and bolted. Behind her, Vanessa screamed something incoherent, but Rachel was already moving, her legs pumping, her arms locked around Liam's small body. She hit the stairs at a run, taking them 2 at a time, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The kitchen doorway appeared above her like salvation. Rachel burst through it into the blinding afternoon light, Liam's face pressed against her shoulder, his thin arms wrapped around her neck in a death grip. She didn't stop running until she reached her car. Rachel's hands shook so violently she could barely get the key into the ignition. Liam sat in the passenger seat, his small body rigid, his eyes fixed on the Montgomery house like he expected Vanessa to come crashing through the front door at any moment. Put your seatbelt on, honey. Rachel's voice sounded strange to her own ears, too high, too breathless. She glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Vanessa's face appear in the window, but there was nothing, just the perfect colonial facade staring back at them, keeping its secrets. The engine turned over on the 3rd try. Rachel threw the car into reverse, her tires spitting gravel as she backed out of the circular driveway too fast. She didn't care. She needed distance between them and that basement, between Liam and whatever darkness had taken root in Vanessa's mind. Only when she'd driven 3 blocks and turned onto the main road did Rachel realize She had no idea where she was going. Her apartment was 15 minutes away, a cramped studio in a converted house in Stamford where the heat barely worked and the neighbors fought loudly at 2 in the morning. Not safe. Not appropriate for a traumatized child who'd just been rescued from his own home. The police station. That was the logical choice. That was what responsible people did in situations like this. But Rachel's hands tightened on the steering wheel, and she felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd had exactly 3 interactions with police in her life. The first was when her mother died, and a tired officer had delivered the news with all the warmth of someone reading a grocery list. The second was when she'd reported a break-in at her apartment in Dallas. They'd taken a statement and never followed up. The third was a traffic stop where the officer had made her wait in the cold for 40 minutes while he ran her license, looking at her like she was guilty of something he just hadn't figured out yet. Rachel knew what she looked like to people with authority. Poor, young, uneducated, the kind of person whose word didn't carry weight. And what would she tell them? That she'd been cleaning a house where she'd heard crying from a basement she was explicitly told never to enter. That she'd found the family's child tied up by a nanny who seemed mentally unstable. Would they believe her? Or would they call the Montgomerys first, give them a chance to explain, to present their version of events with their expensive lawyers and their connections? Where are we going? Liam's voice was small, fragile. Rachel pulled into the parking lot of a Dunkin' Donuts and put the car in park. She turned to look at the boy properly for the first time since they'd escaped. In the afternoon light streaming through the windshield, she could see the full extent of what he'd endured. His Harry Potter t-shirt was stained and wrinkled, like he'd been wearing it for days. His dark hair stuck up at odd angles. The rope burns on his wrists were an angry red, and there were bruises on his arms, finger-shaped marks that made Rachel's throat tighten with rage. But it was his eyes that broke her heart. 8 years old, and they held the kind of haunted wariness Rachel had seen in her own mirror after her parents died. The look of someone who'd learned too young that the world wasn't safe, that the people meant to protect you could be the ones who hurt you most. Liam, I need you to tell me the truth, okay? How long has Vanessa been doing this to you? The boy's lower lip trembled. He pulled his knees up to his chest, making himself smaller. I don't know. A while. She started getting weird about a week after she moved in. At first it was just rules. Lots of rules. I had to sit a certain way, eat a certain way. If I did something wrong, she'd make me stand in the corner for hours. His voice dropped to a whisper. Then it got worse. Did she ever take you to the basement before today? Liam nodded, a tear sliding down his cheek. 3 times. She'd tie me up and leave me there, sometimes for a long time. She said it was to teach me discipline, to make me strong like she was made strong. She said her father did it to her when she was little, and look how perfect she turned out. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. She talks to herself a lot, to people who aren't there. She calls them her guides. Rachel felt sick. This wasn't just abuse. It was a cycle of trauma, passed down like a poisonous inheritance. Vanessa had been hurt, and in her fractured mind, she'd convinced herself that inflicting the same pain on Liam was somehow helping him. Have you told your parents? I tried. Liam's voice cracked. 2 days ago, I told my mom that Vanessa scared me, that I didn't want to be alone with her. Mom said I was being dramatic, that Vanessa was wonderful, that I should be grateful we found someone so qualified. He looked up at Rachel with those 2 old eyes. They're never home. They don't see. And when I try to tell them things, they don't listen. Not really. Rachel understood that feeling intimately, the specific loneliness of being young and unheard, of knowing that the adults in your life had already decided who you were and what you were worth. She pulled out her phone, staring at the screen. She had $247 in her checking account. 3 cleaning jobs scheduled for the rest of the week, including 2 more at the Montgomery estate. Her rent was due in 5 days. She had no family nearby, no safety net, no resources beyond her own stubborn determination to survive. Calling the police meant gambling with Liam's safety and her own future. It meant trusting a system that had never been designed with people like her in mind. Not calling the police meant becoming complicit, letting Vanessa remain in that house, potentially hurting Liam again if he was returned to his parents, custody without intervention. Rachel looked at the boy in her passenger seat, this child who'd been invisible in his own home, just like she'd been invisible moving through it. She thought about her brother Jimmy, and how she'd been too young, too powerless to protect him from the fallout of their parents' deaths, how he'd ended up shuffled off to relatives who saw him as a burden. and how that knowledge still kept her up at night. She wouldn't fail another child. "Okay," Rachel said, her voice steadier now. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to the police station, and I'm going to tell them everything, and I'm going to make damn sure they listen." Liam's eyes widened. "What if they don't believe you?" "What if they make me go back?" Rachel reached over and took his small, bruised hand in hers. "Then I'll make them believe me. I promise, Liam, you're not going back to that basement. Not ever." She started the car again, pulling back onto the road. With each mile toward the police station, Rachel felt the life she'd carefully constructed beginning to crumble. But some things mattered more than stability. Some children were worth burning your whole world down for. The Greenwich Police Department occupied a modern brick building on North Street, its clean lines and manicured landscaping reflecting the affluent town it served. Rachel pulled into the visitor parking lot and cut the engine, her stomach churning with anxiety. Through the glass doors, she could see officers moving about in their pressed uniforms, the kind of people who'd probably never lived in a car or skipped meals to make rent. The kind of people who might look at her secondhand clothes and hear her Texas accent and make assumptions about what kind of person shows up with someone else's child. "It's going to be okay," she said, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring Liam or herself. Inside, the station smelled like coffee and floor polish. A middle-aged woman sat behind a reception desk, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she typed something into a computer. She looked up as Rachel and Liam approached, her professional smile faltering slightly as she took in the boy's disheveled appearance and the rope burns on his wrists. "Can I help you?" Rachel's mouth felt dry. "I need to report a child in danger. This is Liam Montgomery. His nanny has been—" She paused, trying to find words adequate for what she'd witnessed. "She's been abusing him, tying him up in the basement. I found him there today." The receptionist's expression shifted immediately. She reached for her phone. "Let me get an officer out here right away. Please. Have a seat." They waited on hard plastic chairs bolted to the wall. Liam pressed against Rachel's side, his small hand gripping hers. She could feel him trembling and wished she had something comforting to say, some guarantee that everything would be okay. But Rachel had learned young that the world didn't traffic in guarantees. "Miss Miller." Rachel looked up to see a tall black woman in a detective's shield, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had kind eyes, the first thing Rachel noticed, and a scar above her left eyebrow that suggested she knew something about surviving hard things. "I'm Detective Angela Morrison. Why don't you and Liam come back to my office, and you can tell me what happened." The office was small but tidy, with family photos on the desk. Detective Morrison with 2 teenagers, all of them laughing at some beach somewhere. A place where families could be happy and safe. Rachel felt a pang of longing so sharp it almost took her breath away. "Take your time," Morrison said gently, pulling out a notepad. "Start from the beginning." So Rachel did. She explained how she'd been cleaning the Montgomery house, heard crying from the basement, found Liam tied up with bedsheets. She described Vanessa's strange behavior over the past weeks, the way Liam had changed, the disconnected look in the nanny's eyes when she'd appeared in the basement. She tried to keep her voice steady, factual, but when she got to the part about Liam's bruises, about him saying this had happened multiple times, her composure cracked. "And I know I should have called immediately," Rachel said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know I shouldn't have left the scene, but I was scared. He was terrified, and I had to get him out of there." Morrison's expression remained neutral, but she nodded. "You did the right thing. It took courage to act." She turned to Liam, her voice softening. "Liam, I know this is hard, but I need to ask you some questions." "Is that okay?" The boy nodded, his grip on Rachel's hand tightening. For the next 30 minutes, Morrison gently coaxed the story from Liam. The 8-year-old spoke haltingly at first, then with increasing urgency, describing weeks of escalating abuse, Vanessa's rigid rules, the hours standing in corners, the basement punishments, the way she talked to invisible people, calling them her guides, saying they told her how to fix broken children. Morrison's jaw tightened as she wrote, but her voice remained calm and reassuring. When Liam finished, she set down her pen and leaned forward. "You're very brave, Liam. What happened to you wasn't your fault. Do you understand that?" Liam nodded, but Rachel could see the doubt in his eyes. Children always blamed themselves. She knew that truth intimately. Morrison excused herself to make some calls. Through the office's small window, Rachel watched her speak urgently into her phone, saw other officers being pulled into conversations. The machine was moving now, and Rachel felt the first flutter of hope. 20 minutes later, Morrison returned with another detective, an older white man with a gray mustache who introduced himself as Detective Peters. "We've contacted Child Protective Services," Morrison said. "They're sending someone over. We've also dispatched officers to the Montgomery residence to detain Vanessa Hartwell for questioning." "What about Liam's parents?" Rachel asked. "They need to know." "We're attempting to reach them now," Peters interrupted, his tone less warm than Morrison's. "But I need to ask you some questions. Miss Miller, you said you work as a cleaner for the Montgomerys." "Yes, 3 days a week." "And you were explicitly told not to enter the basement." Rachel's stomach dropped. She saw where this was going. "Yes, but—" "So you violated the terms of your employment, entered a restricted area of the home, and removed the family's child without parental permission." "I heard him crying. He was tied up, hurt. I'm not questioning your motives," Peters said, though his expression suggested otherwise. "I'm establishing the facts. The Montgomerys are prominent members of this community. When we bring allegations like this, we need to make sure everything is documented properly." Translation: "We need to make sure you're not some disgruntled employee making up stories." Rachel felt anger flare hot in her chest. "Look at his wrists. Look at the bruises." "I didn't put those there. Vanessa did." Morrison held up a hand. "No one's questioning what happened to Liam. We're taking this very seriously, but Detective Peters is right. We need to follow proper procedure." She turned to her colleague. "Why don't you go check on the officers at the Montgomery house?" Peters left, taking his skepticism with him. Morrison sighed and rubbed her eyes. "I apologize for that. He's old school, worried about liability. But between you and me," she looked at Rachel directly, "you saved that kid. Don't doubt that for a second." A social worker arrived an hour later, a weary-looking woman named Patricia Chen who examined Liam's injuries with professional detachment while making soothing sounds. She took photographs, asked more questions, made notes on a tablet. "We'll need to place him in emergency foster care tonight," Chen said. "Until we can complete a full investigation and determine whether it's safe for him to return home." "No!" Liam's voice cracked with panic. He turned to Rachel, his eyes wide. "Don't let them take me, please. I want to stay with you." Rachel's heart broke. "Honey, I can't. I don't have the right kind of home for you. These people, they're going to keep you safe. You kept me safe." Tears streamed down his face. "You're the only one who listened." Chen gave Rachel a sympathetic look. "It's standard procedure. We need to ensure he's in a properly vetted environment while we investigate." Rachel knelt in front of Liam, taking both his hands. "Listen to me. This is temporary. These people are going to help you. And I promise, I'm not disappearing. I'll check on you. Okay? You promise?" "I promise." It was a promise that would cost her everything she had left. But some promises were worth keeping, no matter the price. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She lay on her narrow bed in her studio apartment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of somewhere she'd never been, and waited for her phone to ring. Every car door that slammed outside, every raised voice from the neighbors, made her heart jump. At 7:23 a.m., her phone finally buzzed. Unknown number. "Miss Miller." "This is Claire Montgomery." Rachel sat up, her pulse quickening. Mrs. Montgomery's voice was ice, the kind of cold that came from privilege and fury mixed in equal measure. "Mrs. Montgomery, I can explain. You broke into my home. You violated our trust. You kidnapped my son and filled his head with lies about a woman who has done nothing but care for him with complete devotion." Rachel's mouth fell open. "Lies. Did you see his wrists? The bruises? Your son was tied up in your basement. Vanessa explained everything to the police. Liam has been having behavioral issues, violent outbursts, destructive tantrums. She was trying to implement a therapeutic restraint technique she learned in her child psychology courses. Everything she did was for his own safety and well-being." "That's insane. She's been torturing him for weeks." "You're fired, Miss Miller, effective immediately. I've already contacted the cleaning service that placed you. I've also spoken with my attorney about filing charges for trespassing, unlawful restraint of a minor, and defamation. The only reason I'm not pursuing it is because my husband thinks it would create unnecessary publicity for our family." Rachel's hands shook. "You can't actually believe her story. Your son is terrified of her. He begged me not to leave him. Liam is 8 years old and has an overactive imagination. He's been struggling since we increased his academic schedule. Vanessa was helping him build discipline. What you saw was a therapeutic intervention taken completely out of context by someone with no education, no understanding of child development, and apparently no boundaries. I know what I saw. What you saw, Mrs. Montgomery said, her voice dropping to something deadly quiet, was an opportunity to insert yourself into matters that don't concern you, to play hero and feel important. Well, congratulations, Miss Miller. You've destroyed an innocent woman's reputation, traumatized my son by ripping him away from his home, and cost yourself the best job you'll probably ever have. The line went dead. Rachel sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Her stomach churned with nausea and disbelief. They were protecting Vanessa. They were choosing to believe a polished lie over their own son's trauma because the truth was inconvenient, because it reflected poorly on their judgment, because people like the Montgomerys didn't admit to mistakes. Her phone buzzed again, a text from the cleaning service. Your services are no longer needed. Contract terminated, effective immediately. Then another text, this one from Sarah, the coordinator who'd been assigning her jobs for 3 years. Rachel, what the hell did you do? The Montgomerys are spreading the word. I've had 4 other clients cancel on you this morning. I can't use you anymore. I'm sorry. Rachel's breath came in short gasps. 4 clients. That was more than half her income. Gone. Just like that. Over the next 2 days, the reality of her situation crystallized with brutal clarity. The remaining clients dropped her one by one, spooked by whispers of instability and boundary issues that rippled through Greenwich's tight-knit community of wealthy families. The Montgomerys hadn't just fired her, they'd blacklisted her. Detective Morrison called on the 3rd day. I wanted to update you on the case. CPS investigated Vanessa's background. She does have a degree in child psychology from Columbia. She provided documentation of the therapeutic restraint training she claims to have received. Her references all checked out, glowing recommendations from 3 previous families. And Liam, a pause. He's been returned to his parents' custody. CPS determined there wasn't sufficient evidence of ongoing danger. Vanessa has been dismissed from her position, but no charges are being filed. The Montgomerys have agreed to family counseling. Rachel closed her eyes. So that's it. She just walks away. I'm sorry, Rachel. I know you did the right thing, but sometimes the system doesn't reward that. Sometimes the system protected the wrong people and punished the ones brave enough to speak truth. 2 weeks after rescuing Liam, Rachel stood in line at the food bank on the south side of Stamford, her hood pulled up despite the mild November afternoon. She'd lost 12 pounds she couldn't afford to lose, her jeans hanging loose on her hips, held up by a belt cinched to its last hole. The coffee can that had held $3,147 now contained $94.23. Rent was overdue. Her landlord, a perpetually irritated man named Frank who smelled like cigars, had taped a final notice to her door in aggressive red letters. Pay or vacate by November 30th. Rachel had applied to 17 jobs in the past week. Grocery stores, retail chains, fast food restaurants, anywhere that didn't require references from previous employers. Most hadn't called back. The 3 who had seemed promising at first, until they ran background checks and found her name connected to the Montgomery incident. The story had made the local news, carefully worded to avoid lawsuits, but damning nonetheless. Local woman removed child from home. Family disputes, abuse claims. Her phone rang less now. Sarah from the cleaning service had stopped responding to texts. The few friends Rachel had made in Connecticut, other cleaners, a waitress from the diner she sometimes ate at, had gone quiet, probably warned that association with her was professional suicide. She was toxic, untouchable, a troublemaker who couldn't be trusted. At night, Rachel lay awake and wondered if she'd made a catastrophic mistake, if she'd misread the situation in the basement, let her own childhood trauma cloud her judgment. But then she'd remember Liam's wrists, the terror in his eyes, the way he'd clung to her and begged not to be left behind. She'd done the right thing. So why did the right thing feel like drowning? The food bank volunteer, an elderly woman with kind eyes, handed Rachel a box of non-perishables, canned soup, pasta, peanut butter, a loaf of bread that would go stale in 2 days. You take care of yourself, honey, the woman said softly, and Rachel had to look away before the pity in her voice broke something inside her. Back in her apartment, Rachel sat on her sagging couch and stared at her laptop. at the community college websites she'd bookmarked months ago. Nursing programs, education degrees, pathways to a life where she'd be more than invisible help, more than someone easily discarded. All of it felt impossibly distant now. Even if she could scrape together tuition, who would hire a nurse with her reputation? Who would trust a teacher who'd been painted as unstable, someone who overstepped boundaries and made wild accusations against respectable families? Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Rachel almost didn't answer. Tired of creditors and rejection, but something made her swipe to accept. Rachel Miller, a woman's voice, professional but warm. Yes, my name is Jennifer Alvarez. I'm the director of Hope Harbor, a non-profit organization that supports survivors of domestic violence and child abuse. Detective Morrison gave me your number. She thought you might be interested in meeting with me. Rachel's throat tightened. I don't understand. I've been following your situation. What you did for Liam Montgomery took remarkable courage, the kind of courage we need more of in this world. A pause. I know you're going through a difficult time right now. I'd like to help, if you'll let me. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? Rachel looked around her shabby apartment, at the eviction notice on her counter, at the nearly empty coffee can that represented all her failed dreams. She had nothing left to lose. Okay, she whispered. Yes, I'll meet you. That night, for the first time in 2 weeks, Rachel slept without nightmares. Sometimes salvation came from unexpected places. Sometimes it wore a professional voice and offered coffee. Jennifer Alvarez wasn't what Rachel expected. She'd pictured someone older, corporate, wearing a power suit and sympathy smile. Instead, the woman who waved at her from a corner table at the Starbucks on Summer Street was maybe 40, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a messy bun and laugh lines around her eyes. She wore jeans and a Hope Harbor hoodie, and when she stood to shake Rachel's hand, her grip was firm and genuine. Thank you for meeting me, Jennifer said, gesturing for Rachel to sit. I got you a coffee. Hope black is okay. Wasn't sure how you take it. Black is perfect. Rachel wrapped her cold hands around the cup, grateful for its warmth. She hadn't been able to afford coffee in days. Jennifer studied her for a moment, her expression thoughtful but not pitying. Detective Morrison told me what happened. All of it. Not the sanitized version the Montgomerys are spreading around town. Rachel's shoulders tensed. Are you here to offer sympathy? Because I appreciate it, but sympathy doesn't pay rent. No. Jennifer smiled slightly. I'm here to offer you a job. Rachel blinked. What? Hope Harbor operates 3 shelters in Fairfield County and runs educational programs for at-risk youth. We need people who understand what it means to be vulnerable, who don't turn away when they see something wrong. Jennifer leaned forward. We need people like you, Rachel. People with courage. I'm not qualified for nonprofit work. I'm a house cleaner who didn't finish college. You're a young woman who risked everything to protect a child who wasn't your responsibility. That's the only qualification that matters to me. Jennifer pulled out a folder. I'm offering you a position as a community outreach coordinator. You'd work with families, connect them to resources, provide support. The pay isn't great, $42,000 a year to start, but it comes with health insurance and tuition assistance if you want to go back to school. Rachel stared at the folder like it might disappear if she looked away. $42,000 a year. It was more money than she'd ever made in her life. It was stability. It was a future. Why? Her voice came out hoarse. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know what it takes to stand up when standing up costs you everything. I did it once, a long time ago. Jennifer's expression darkened briefly. I was a social worker who reported a colleague for abuse. Lost my job, my reputation, nearly lost my mind. But someone gave me a second chance. Now I run Hope Harbor, and I make sure other people who do the right thing don't fall through the cracks. Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. She'd been alone for so long, fighting every battle by herself, that the idea of someone catching her when she fell felt almost impossible to believe. There's something else, Jennifer continued. We've set up a scholarship fund in your name. It's small right now, but we've reached out to some donors who were moved by your story. The real story, not the Montgomery version. We want to help you finish your education, whatever path you choose. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Say you'll let us help you the way you helped Liam. Jennifer pushed the folder across the table. You saved a child, Rachel. Now let someone save you. Rachel opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a job offer letter, an application for tuition assistance, information about Hope Harbor's mission. She saw herself reflected in the glossy pages, not as a failure, not as a troublemaker, but as someone worthy of investment. "When do I start?" she whispered. Jennifer smiled. "How about Monday?" For the first time in weeks, Rachel felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Real, tangible hope. The kind that came with health insurance and a paycheck. 6 months later, Rachel stood in front of a community center in Bridgeport, her arms full of supply boxes, and marveled at how different her life looked. She had an apartment now, nothing fancy, but it had heat that worked and windows that locked and neighbors who smiled when they passed her in the hallway. She had business cards with her name and title printed in crisp letters. Rachel Miller, Community Outreach Coordinator, Hope Harbor. She had a savings account that was slowly growing back, dollar by careful dollar. But more than any of that, she had purpose. Rachel, a teenage girl named Maya, bounded up to her, all energy and oversized sweatshirt. "Mrs. Chen said you're teaching the self-advocacy workshop today. Can I help set up?" "Absolutely." Rachel handed her a box of handouts. "You remember what we talked about, speaking up even when it's scary?" Maya's smile faltered slightly. She was 15, had spent 3 years in foster care after her mother's boyfriend hurt her. She'd learned young to stay quiet, to make herself small. Rachel saw herself in the girl's cautious eyes. "I remember," Maya said softly. "You showed me it's possible." Those words landed in Rachel's chest like a gift. This was why she'd survived those terrible weeks after rescuing Liam. So she could be here, now, helping other people find their voices. The workshop filled quickly, 20 women and teens, all carrying stories of trauma and resilience. Rachel talked about boundaries, about trusting your instincts, about the difference between kindness and being a doormat. She shared her own story carefully. Not the sanitized version, but the real one. The basement, the choice, the consequences, the slow climb back. "Speaking up cost me everything," Rachel said, her voice steady. "My job, my reputation, my stability. But staying silent would have cost me something more important. My integrity, my ability to live with myself." She looked around the room. "Some of you are in situations where speaking up feels impossible. I'm not here to tell you it's easy. I'm here to tell you it's worth it, and that you don't have to do it alone." After the workshop, an older woman approached her, wringing her hands nervously. "My grandson," she said quietly. "His teacher. I think something's wrong. He's scared all the time now. But I'm worried if I say something, they'll think I'm causing trouble." Rachel took the woman's hands in hers. "Tell me everything. Let's figure this out together." That evening, Rachel sat in the Hope Harbor office, updating case files. Jennifer poked her head in, smiling. "You're still here? Go home, Rachel. You've been at it for 10 hours. Just finishing up." Rachel saved her work and stretched. "Jennifer, can I ask you something?" "Always. Do you ever hear from the people you helped? Wonder if it made a difference?" Jennifer leaned against the doorframe. "Every day. And then someone like you walks into my life, and I remember, we're not supposed to see all the ripples we create. We just have to trust that throwing the stone matters." Rachel drove home through Bridgeport's streets, past tired buildings and corner stores, past people living lives as complicated and worthy as her own. She thought about Liam, wondered how he was doing, if the counseling had helped, if he remembered the day a cleaner had listened when no one else would. Her phone buzzed at a red light. A text from an unknown number. "Is this Rachel Miller?" "This is Patricia Chen from CPS. Liam Montgomery asked me to give you his mother's new email. He wants to write to you. Is that okay?" Rachel's hands trembled as she typed back, "Yes. Please. Tell him yes." Some stones created ripples that came back to you. Some children remembered who saved them. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in early spring, when the world was beginning to thaw and remember what hope looked like. "Dear Rachel, my name is Liam Montgomery. I don't know if you remember me, but I remember you. You saved my life. Mom says I can write to you now. We've been doing family therapy, and Dr. Harrison said it might help me to tell you what happened after you rescued me. At first, I was so angry that I had to go back home. I thought you abandoned me. But Dr. Harrison helped me understand that you did everything you could, and that sometimes the system doesn't work the way it should. Things are different now. Mom and Dad actually listen when I talk. They're home more. We eat dinner together most nights, and Dad taught me how to play chess. Mom quit 3 of her committees so she could spend more time with me. They apologized for not believing me at first. That was hard for them. But they did it. We found out more about Vanessa after everything happened. She had been hurt really badly when she was a kid, and she never got help. She's in a hospital now, getting the treatment she needs. Dr. Harrison says that hurt people sometimes hurt people, but that doesn't make what she did okay. I'm still scared sometimes, but I'm getting better. I wanted you to know that what you did mattered. You saw me when no one else did. You listened when I was invisible. I think about that a lot. How you were invisible in my house too, just the cleaner. But you were the bravest person there. I'm sending this with a drawing I made. It's a superhero, but she doesn't have a cape or special powers. She just has courage. She looks like you. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for not walking away. Your friend, Liam. Rachel read the email 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Attached was a scan of a child's drawing, a woman with brown hair holding a mop in one hand and a small boy's hand in the other. At the bottom, in careful letters, "Real heroes listen." She printed the drawing and pinned it to her office wall, next to her Hope Harbor badge and the photos from her workshops. It became her touchstone on hard days, when the work felt overwhelming and the stories she heard broke her heart into smaller and smaller pieces. That weekend, Rachel stood in front of her bathroom mirror, preparing for her first day of classes at Norwalk Community College. She'd enrolled in the social work program, using the scholarship fund that had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. Donors who'd heard her story, the real story, had contributed enough to cover not just tuition but books, fees, living expenses. She looked different now than she had a year ago. Stronger, more grounded. Her eyes still carried sadness. Some things never fully healed, but they also held determination and something that looked like peace. Rachel thought about the girl she'd been at 17, burying her parents and learning to survive alone. She thought about the woman she'd been at 26, scrubbing floors in mansions and saving money in a coffee can, invisible to everyone around her. And she thought about who she was becoming, someone who turned pain into purpose, who transformed her own invisibility into a superpower for seeing others who were overlooked and afraid. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "Big news. Local news station wants to do a story on Hope Harbor. They specifically asked for you. Interested?" Rachel smiled. A year ago, she would have said no, would have hidden from attention, from the risk of being seen and judged. But she wasn't that person anymore. "Yes," she typed back. "Let's show them what real courage looks like." She grabbed her backpack, filled with notebooks and highlighted syllabi and dreams that finally felt within reach, and headed out into the spring morning. Somewhere in Greenwich, a boy was learning chess with his father, carrying his own scars but healing. Somewhere in Bridgeport, a teenager named Maya was finding her voice. Somewhere in this complicated, broken, beautiful world, someone else was suffering in silence, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. Rachel had been invisible once, moving through rich people's homes like a ghost. Now she was light itself, shining into dark places, illuminating pain that others wanted to ignore, proving that the most powerful transformations began with a single choice to care when caring cost everything. She'd walked into that basement as a cleaner. She'd emerged as exactly who she was always meant to be, a hero who listened. The end. Did you like this story? Would you have done anything differently? Tell me in the comments. See you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe now to receive more exciting stories that you won't want to miss. Thank you very much.